I want to talk about Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders was on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schulz and a cast of other comedians. But it's really Andrew Schultz's, it's the show that he calls the shots on. And I'll sort of prove that to you in a little bit. And Bernie was out here talking about, you know, basically agreeing with Andrew Schulz when Andrew Schulz said things like the Democratic Party conspired against you and, you know, they kind of took you out of the race. And he was like, I wouldn't disagree with that. Andrew Schulz said it was sort of undemocratic and Bernie didn't disagree with that. I want to point to one particular clip that I think I both agree with, but deeply bothered me. And I think points to really what it kind of a failure in the Bernie coalition that's always persisted, which is around, I think, a radical race politics. And here he is basically agreeing with Schultz about, you know, woke identity politics being a problem. Now, before I get into it, I do want to say that I didn't find Bernie Sanders very adversarial in this interview. I don't think he was like, you know, he didn't try to stick it to Andrew Schultz about, you know, his documented glazing of Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump came on the show before the election and Schultz and everybody else on the show was basically cackling with him, thought he was hilarious, you know, sort of asked him very softball questions. That's why, you know, Trump went on there. But you could make the same argument that why any politician would go on a show like this is because you know you're not going to get pushback. So it really is about you using the platform. Now, I would argue that using the platform can also mean pushing back and doing some research about what some of the incredibly toxic, and not just jokes, but like actually messed up things Andrew Schultz has said on his own podcast. But either way, you've got the platform. So why not do something like that? Bernie didn't approach this interview like that. And here was a moment that I thought was interesting, but also a little unfortunate.
I have to ask this. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you. We have a question we want to ask about what happened to you in 2016 with this Bernie Bros movement, where your followers are seeing they have a racism problem, a misogyny problem. Do you think that's a super PAC thing behind that?
That was the Democratic establishment.
Okay, so that was Akash Singh. He's also a comic who's on that. So do you think this Bernie Bros narrative was, you know, was super PAC money behind it? I was like, how would super PAC money be behind that, my guy? But okay, it was a Democratic establishment, he says.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, that was just, they were sitting there. We had a lot of young people. We had people of color and you know, they create this kind of myth with the help of the corporate media and all that stuff.
You know, it's kind of interesting to that note is during this election, the podcast space, which the Democrats largely avoided, they feel had some influence in the election. And they started to label us the podcast bros and said that we were sexist and we were racist and bigoted. It's almost like it's the exact same strategy to get you out of there.
Yeah, that's what the liberal elite China does.
Okay, I look, Bernie will get better, but I take great umbrage with Andrew Schultz saying that the Democratic establishment called him, you know, the podcast bros and made us sound sexist and racist. Buddy, you know you're sexist and racist. It's okay. It's part of your shtick. You do low-hanging fruit, dumb guy jokes on stage, on your podcast. You've got people who are less famous than you, but who need you for their careers sitting around you, laughing at everything you say so it doesn't seem that bad. But we'll look at a couple of instances when you most certainly are sexist and racist, and that's why people listen to you and like you. I'm not here to say that you shouldn't, you know, listen to Flagrant or you should feel bad about it when they make a sexist joke. I'm just saying, don't deny that that's part of your brand. It's okay. It's just not going to be for everyone. Do you know what I'm saying? And so the other thing, a piece of this is like, oh, the Democrats largely avoided the podcast space. I'm not here to say the Kamala Harris campaign was beautifully run, you know, but like the Call Her Daddy podcast has a massive audience. And she did that podcast and it was good. It was a good interview. They spent maybe too much money on the interview, but they did it. Should she have flown to, Austin to do the interview with Rogan? Probably. Hindsight 2020. Would it have helped? Probably not. Because you can't, Kamala was who she was. She was attached to a horribly unpopular administration for many different reasons. Again, Gaza included. But like the idea then that like we're the same and like the Bernie bro moniker is like the podcast bro moniker. No, they're not. No, they're not. The Bernie bro moniker was certainly a creation of a Democratic establishment that wanted to paint the Bernie socialist left, a lot of the online left, as all male. To some extent, it was true, but also, you saw a lot of dudes, but also those dudes weren't necessarily like racist misogynists. You know what I'm saying? However, I do think that the Bernie Sanders campaign broadly could have done a much better job making inroads into the Black community. The problem is that you've got a lot of gatekeepers like Representative Jim Clyburn, right, who threw down with Biden, and that was hugely important in the South, right? But there could have been better and more inroads made with the Black community, especially around 2016 and 2020. Bernie was protested by Black Lives Matter. And I think he was very gracious. He allowed them to take the stage, whatnot. But like, Bernie has always been like, look, this is a rainbow coalition and whatnot. I think he could have done a much better job at driving that home. Maybe even the problem is that Bernie, we know, never picked up the phone. He didn't even ask for AOC's endorsement until he had his mini heart attack. And she was like, I'm joining you on the road. Okay. That was 2020. And he was like, okay. He didn't even ask her. So is he reaching out to Jesse Jackson to make sure Jesse Jackson supporting him? Even when he supported him, Jesse's run, right? In the 80s, in the Rainbow Push Coalition? No, he's not doing that. As far as I know, again, if you worked on the campaign, maybe you know differently. But like, so there are critiques to be levied. The Bernie Bros thing was absolutely overly inflated by the Democratic establishment, but come on, miss me with this like 1-to-1. So this whole sort of like, yeah, we're both being treated horribly by women and people of color is just so sad to me. But okay, I digress. And here is a little bit more from Bernie that I think maybe does resonate, even though it's met with some sort of hyena cackles from this little squad here.
They run away. Look, again, I would hope that everybody who's watching the program is that we as a nation have got to end all forms of bigotry, right?
Yes.
That I start off as a basic assumption.
Unless it's to your close friends, right?
Yeah, whether it's racism or sexism, homophobia, or xenophobia, whatever it is. But, liberal Democrats talk about.
First of all, I love that Andrew Schulz is, unless it's to your close friends, right? And it's like, haha, unless it's to the people who I have sitting around me who probably don't get paid very well, but they just get paid in notoriety for being here, who I have like a very unequal relationship with. And there is a South Asian guy and there is a Black guy and they have to laugh at all my racist jokes and like me making fun of them, unless it's that, like, right? And they all sort of laugh awkwardly. Guys, let me never. And I'm sure maybe some flagrant offenders will find this and be like, you're super unfamous and unpopular. Fine. I would never want to be surrounded by yes men or women, because they'd be women. Truly never wanted that at all.
But not all the time. And then you get to what we call identity politics.
Yeah.
That you're Black, you're wonderful, you're tremendous, you're gay, you're the greatest human being on earth.
Yeah.
And rather than say, what do you stand for?
Exactly.
You're gay, that's fine, who cares?
Yeah.
But what do you stand for?
Yeah.
Okay, Bernie's not wrong. It doesn't matter your identity. It does matter what you stand for. But that's also a massive bastardization of the term identity politics. And so I would love for him to add just the word empty identity politics. What empty identity politics are is, by virtue of your identity, you simply are entitled to, more accolades or more, whatever, like more shine, people listening to you. Empty identity politics can be weaponized, and I've seen destroy, organizations, movements. It is bad, but identity politics began, again, as a radical Black feminist endeavor to talk about intersectionality. And so here is a man who, you know, he's showing his age a little bit, man. You can easily talk about intersectionality. In fact, I would argue that in many of your campaign speeches, you do. When you say, you know, this is about black, white, gay, straight, Latino, blah, you know, Asian, and he goes on and on and on. And, you know, he's talking about the working class struggle. He's talking about the 99%. And so it's sad to see him not be a little more fine-tuned on this particular issue, especially when the majority of working people are women of color, number one. And that the Democratic coalition that supported Bernie and that support real progressive ideas are working class people of color, right? Are young people. But I do love him explaining, like, it is what you're for. Like, it should matter what you're for. But again, I'd rather him go on Pod Save America and make that point to them rather than go on the Flagrant podcast and make that point. Does that make sense? It's like, you know your audience, know who you're speaking to. Right now, you're just kind of reifying their own anti-woke backlash around people being too sensitive, or around, oh, why is being gay so great? You know, that kind of.
You know, is every gay person brilliant and wonderful and great? No, of course not. Everybody's a human being.
Yeah.
So the issue is what you stand for, which gets you back to what we discussed earlier, class politics, in the sense of which side are you on? Are you going to stand with working families? Are you going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage or not? Are you going to fight to guarantee health care to all people or not? Are you going to demand that the wealthiest people start paying their fair share of taxes or not? Those are the issues. And no one cares what color you are, you know, what your gender is, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm sorry.
So I'm glad he made that case. And I think it's important for, fragile white men to understand that this is not about being open season on them. And maybe that was an angle, and that's fine. But here's my problem, and it dovetails with some of the arguments I've had with a one Cenk Uygur over the last, few months. And it dovetails with, I think, the problems I have with whitewashing someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, or rolling out the red carpet for them, not pushing back on them, and trying to find this common ground with this mythical right-wing populist, is that if you are only to connect with them on economic issues or on, stopping funding foreign wars, you are necessarily throwing people of color, marginalized communities, whether they be Arab or Muslim, whether they be, Black Americans fighting for criminal justice reform, or who deal with racism in everyday effing life, you are necessarily throwing them under the bus to break bread with people who are ultimately kind of just using you. And so we know, that's something I'm not willing to do. That's not something I think any of progressive leaders should be willing to do. Because to whitewash Marjorie Greene's statements, not just on Jewish people, but on Arabs and Muslims, right? And people who should know better, to say nothing of how she talks about Black Americans, the entire attack on woke, to say nothing of the QAnon conspiracy. This is a massively opportunistic, craven politician who, when it's open season on Black people, she throws down. It's okay to be, worship some sort of dark lord named Q, she throws down, right? Whether we're doing anti-Semitic tropes, she throws down. And so this is my problem, is that necessarily when you go on these shows and you glaze these people, you're excusing a lot of other shit that they've said. And so maybe this is there. I've got two clips. It just gives you more of a sense of Andrew Schulz. Here's Andrew Schulz saying that he used to be a Democrat, but then Democrats got all woke and annoying. That's why he's more of a Republican now.
The sides switched so much. When I was younger, Democrats were cool. They were getting their dick sucked in the office. They were right? They were supportive of hip hop music. They said, do whatever you want. We don't want to be in your bedroom. They were cool with gay people. It was cool to be a Democrat. Now conservatives got 3 baby mamas. The president got 3 baby mamas. He's getting pussy left and right. Right? He's cool. He's the one saying, say whatever the fuck you want. So now conservatives have become Democrats. So I don't think I've changed. I just like the dudes that get pussy and say whatever they want.
Hell yeah. I like dudes that get pussy and say whatever they want. That's why you're a stand-up comic, my guy. Like he's proven his point. And what you just saw, and the podcast world has done this, is that's a bit, that's a joke bit. That's a bit that gets laughs. You got laughs there. That's a bit that gets laughs on stage. And it's a bit that gets you laughs specifically with a right-wing audience, which is an audience that Flagrant courts. Call it a mass audience. You could call it a right-wing audience. That's the audience that he's courting. The difference is that this is being laundered as some sort of either political or intellectual insight, as he's saying, like, the Democrats now, they're the party, you can't do anything. And the Republicans are like, yeah, hell yeah, freedom of speech. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's persecuting people for speaking out about Palestine? Who is scared of drag shows? Like, okay, no. It's cool if you're gay, but you have to be Peter Thiel gay. So it's cool if you're a billionaire and gay. It's cool if you're trans, but you got to be Caitlyn Jenner trans or Brianna Wu trans, right? You've got to be a trans person who's a right winger and who is basically a sellout, right? Like, it's okay to be black, but you got to be Candace Owens. Like, what are you talking about? This is the most fragile snowflake ass anti-DEI cannot handle a black person existing in the military or in life ass party that we've ever seen. So again, if you really want to interrogate the bit, again, it's not actually political commentary. It's a bit. It's a comedic bit. That's all it is. But if you really want to interrogate it, it's bullshit. And so this is the kinds of things that he's passing off, but there's more. Because for me, this feels much more on brand. This is a like, I'm shooting from the hip. I'm just talking here. I'm talking to my bros who don't get paid other than in sponsorship. They're getting paid to laugh at me. And here I am just trying to like spitball about what I think about colonialism. Uh-oh. There's a South Asian guy. There is, I think he's Indian. And there is a black guy on your pod. So watch how this plays out. And again, it gives you a sense into the kind of dumbassery that this person is allowed to spew that is really deeply rooted in just kind of like a chauvinistic white supremacist outlook that even his own co-hosts are trying to rein him in on. And he cannot get it. He cannot grasp it because it's not what he feels.
Country, like, does Hawaii have the ability to maintain their Hawaiian culture? And when Western culture starts to come in, or even Japanese culture, where these other cultures start to chip away at the Hawaiian identity, do they have the right to be frustrated at that? Or are they racist when they're frustrated?
Yeah, but again, you're talking about a colonized place that was in, like, that's where the difference is.
Okay,
it just
remove
is
colonization. Like,
so he's like, is there even any right for like the people? Like, so what? So you move there. So Hawaii is being totally invaded by people who are not native Hawaiians or who, are just trying to like cash in on and screw up the rental market or the housing market and such. Like, well, what's wrong with that? And then Akash is like, I mean, colonialism, that's a problem. And then Andrew Schultz is like, oh, okay, well, without colonialism, help me prove my point in a vacuum.
do a thought experiment. Just do a thought experiment.
Yeah, as a thought experiment, if they'd never been colonized, don't worry about it.
Everybody's been colonized, so that cancels out everybody.
I mean, they're still colonized, like right now.
Everybody's been colonized? Was England colonized? Was China colonized? I mean, there was an attempt, right, from Japan. It was an occupation. What are we talking about?
Okay.
It's not Indians moving into England where it's like, well, we have to come here because you actively took all of our jewels. They're still in your fucking palace. So I have more opportunity here. I'm coming.
You think those jewels are doing anything?
India was a
jewels are going to help too.
He keeps on moving the goalposts. He's like, Akash is just like, well, there's jewels in the UK. Like, they stole all the mineral, like all of our wealth. And Andrew's like, so you think you do? What are we talking about? Jewels now? Like, I love he just keeps on moving. It's like, come on. You're supposed to agree with me. make me look smart. That's your point here.
William, I hate this revisionist history where India was wealthy and then now all of a sudden they're broke.
Yeah, how is that now all of a sudden? Like, what are you even talking about?
I mean, look at Africa. Like, they took all their resources, and Africa's still a poor country, continent.
Downloading history of colonialism. So, black podcaster speaks up. I don't know his name. I apologize. And he's like, look at Africa. Europe colonized all of Africa, took all the mineral wealth, and the continent is the poorest in the world. So, and he's trying so hard to be like, yeah, but, and he'll get it.
Still a poor country, continent.
I mean, like, I just know that you don't have anything to substantiate that.
Wait. I love that he's like also accidentally racist in this response where he's like, looks at him and he's like, I mean, I just know that you don't have anything to substantiate. Substantiate what? Colonialism? You don't have anything to substantiate colonialism? I don't know, my guy. Read a history book. What do you mean you don't have anything to substantiate? Go visit Potosi in Bolivia, the silver capital of the world back in the day. It was the richest place on earth until there was no more silver. I mean, I'm just like, now it's one of the poorest places on earth. Like, you don't have anything. This is the kind of brainworm, dumb ass that these podcasters like to peddle. And so if you call them podcast bro, I could cry into your fucking money, my guy. You're still selling out arenas. You're fine. Calm down. Don't make us launder you as some sort of intellectual. This shit drives me up the wall.
So it's like, there's no way to, we're living in like a world where like there's no way to prove the trajectory would have gone completely positive. There could have been infighting.
I don't know if it would have been positive. I don't know if it would have been completely positive, but it would have been. I said it was just completely different trajectory. I didn't say it was worse.
Right.
Completely different trajectory. Like they did not have control of.
In that situation with Mexico, like I would totally understand if Mexico was like, hey, I don't want you chipping away at our culture.
Okay, so I'm assuming what he's trying to do is make a broader, like, American culture is being ruined point, but it doesn't matter. It's ridiculous. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do